How's everyone doing? We start thinking about research and kind of how it relates to what it is that we want to do here within sport management. One of the things that we have to kind of fall back on is the scientific method. And the scientific method's really predicated upon this whole idea of theory and how it kind of relates to what goals you want to accomplish. So let's say you're going to go out and you're going to do something like an economic impact analysis. All right, we understand that, and we're like, oh, it has a tangible financial component, and that's true. But there's theory that sort of undergirds everything that you do within the business world. And so we're an extension of that, and so theory becomes very important for us. So what becomes, or one of the things I'd like to focus on here then, is this whole idea of learning how to use and understand theory. Well, theory is going to be important to the social sciences because it helps to explain or describe a set of phenomena. That's it. Now, you have a lot of things, and that's why down here, explain or describe. You can get very complicated if you want with theory, and you have all this whole idea. A theory is a group of ideas that work together that you can then generate hypotheses or research questions and then answer something. Now that, again, very scientific, and when you're dealing with chemicals and you're mixing things in a chemistry lab, that's wonderful. With people, it's a little bit different. So what I like to do is, when we think about theory, just try to keep it simple. I try to operate off the KISS model here. And what the KISS model is simply saying is that we want to explain something. We want to describe how and why people do what it is that they do. A theory is going to help us do that. Now, a little background on theory. There's a lot of different types of theories, and ideographic versus non-methetic is probably going back to maybe some of your biology days, same as with inductive and deductive reasoning if you kind of want to go back all the way to high school or whatever. But just as a review, ideographic is talking about a theory is just trying to explain something specific, almost like a singular instance of something. Non-methetic is looking more at patterns, and non-methetic is more what we're going to be involved with when we start looking at a social science point of view of sport, because yes, 95% of people that attend or are part of some gym are satisfied with everything. Well, that means 5% are not. Should you change everything about your gym because of that 5%? Not really. And that's what non-methetic is really talking about, is that we're going to talk about these patterns, these trends, these generalizations. But you want to keep things as simple as possible. You want to explain things as easily as possible. Now, people are complicated, therefore the theories that help to explain people's behavior, those are going to be complicated as well. But we want to think about this, about doing everything economically or keeping things as efficient and parsimonious. Inductive versus deductive, again going back to kind of the old-fashioned scientific method in the hard biological and physical sciences. Well, inductive, and I put these triangles because inductive, you start with a particular instance of something, and then you gather a lot of these individual things, and from that you develop a generalized understanding. All right? Deductive, which is more what we're used to, is very different. I have a hypothesis as to why men consume MMA more so than women, right? And that your hypothesis is a generalized understanding, and then you go and you find individual instances. You survey men and women, or you interview men and women and ask them, why do you like MMA, why do you not, that type of thing. Whereas with ideographic, you would just go and you would start interviewing people, and you'd say, okay, what's your perceptions of MMA? And then from that, you would then find this generalization that men tend to enjoy MMA more so than women, even though for women it's increasing in popularity. That's the difference between the two. Again, we're not trying to get overtly complicated here, but just to let you know that, again, social life is complicated, people are complicated, therefore the things that we're involved with are, as a result, going to be complicated. A sociologist, very famous theorist, George Ritzer, talks about this micro-macro integration. And I like this picture because, when you look at water or salt or something in its collectivity, that's essentially the macro, right? And then you kind of boil it down to the atomistic aspects, the individuals, the people. We talk about the sporting culture, right? Are we in America changing the culture so that soccer is going to be more popular, right? That's a large-scale process, right? But within that large-scale process, what you have are individual instances and explanations. So you have individual people that are growing up with the game of soccer. You're enjoying the game of soccer. It's part of who you are. The MLS has gained in popularity to the point that, franchises, when they were first started years ago in the MLS, cost $3 and $5 million. Now they're valued at over $100 million, and you have to have different academies associated with it, which means you're trying to grow through individual instances. You're trying to grow the game of soccer so that it then has a cultural impact here in the United States. That sort of oscillating back and forth between the individual and the collective, or the structural, or the micro and the macro, we're going to be doing that a lot. And it sounds difficult, except naturally we do this every single day. Coakley is one of the more famous sports sociologists, and far smarter than, than probably any of us involved with this particular class. And I like the way he starts talking about getting into theory can be very intimidating, because you're like, it's complicated, I don't understand it, it's very abstract, and to some extent it's true. But what he does, at least for social science or sociological theories, and he came up with these because as a sports sociologist, he's used to talking about and trying to explain things within the institution of sport. All right? And so structural theories are just like it sounds. Structure means generally, not all the time, but generally in sociology, larger scale things. Okay, so we're talking about participation rates. The millions of individuals that are involved in sport, recreation, and physical activity in the United States every year. You can go through the current population survey is the government's data collection process between each biennial census. So you have the census, right, every 10 years. And every year they do this CPS. Well, you can go through the census, people, and you can actually find, I think it used to be table 1222, the number of people that participate in sport and recreational activities here in the United States. And when you look at all of those millions and millions of people and what they do, that's a large-scale phenomenon. That's a structural theory. When we talk about baseball being America's pastime, we're talking about America. We're talking about a culture. We're talking about all of these large-scale things going on. Well, then I want to skip down because that's the big stuff, right? Well, then the small stuff is interactionist theory, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But social constructionist thinking says it's about processing the social world more from the individual's point of view. And this kind of goes, if we're thinking about that micro-macro interaction that Ritzer was talking about, interactionist is going to be the micro. And it's creation of meaning, understanding that I hate jogging, okay? But some people absolutely love it. The people that have like the 26.2 or the 13.1 stickers on their cars, going out and running marathons or half marathons, things like that, this is important to them. And they're communicating their love of that sport, that activity, to everyone else in society. All right? So whereas structural is talking more about, let's say, America's pastime, or the thousands of people that participate in the Boston Marathon, interactionist theorizing is talking about you being able to go to your first baseball, or for me, for example, being able to go to my first baseball game with my dad as a kid, all right, and how that was meaningful to me. All right, so hopefully you can see the difference. Well, if we talk about the big things with structural theories, and we talked about the small things in interactionist theories, well, what's left? We have all this stuff in the middle, and that's what he labels cultural theories. And in sport, we have these things called narratives, right? And they just kind of start up, right? So one of the current narratives is talking about sports popularity, certain sports. If we're talking about the narrative of soccer, is it increased? The narrative of hockey, whether it's increasing or decreasing here in the United States. The ascension of NASCAR. MMA, and some of those other kind of traditionally labeled subcultural sports as they're starting to gain momentum. All right, when we talk about the Washington Redskins and the recent copyright finding from the U.S. government and punishing them because this particular logo and imagery is insensitive to a particular cultural group, that's going to be an example of a cultural theory, because it's not talking about millions of people like maybe a structural theory is. But it's not talking about just individuals, groups and collections of individuals like interactionists. Think of the cultural theories as maybe talking about, dozens or thousands of people. All right, so it's that middle ground. So if this is macro, large, this is micro, small, then culture will be what we call meso, right in the middle. Before we get into the next discussion, just take some time and kind of process this information. Theories are important for describing certain phenomena. And what it allows us to do then is to explain and then hopefully predict, and within the world of sport and business, and then obviously sport business, there's an aspect of predicting, trying to understand what people are going to do. But we also want to understand how things are meaningful, why people are involved in sport, recreation, and physical activity, and theories are going to provide some of that information.